Hi guys, today I'm going to look at the too hot to handle problem from last week. That was week 5, and that was Professors McGonagall, Lupin and Moody are in Diagon Alley doing some shopping. They have 361 golden galleons altogether to begin with. Professor McGonagall spends 1/4 of her money. Professor Lupin spends half of his money. Professor Moody spends 2/3 of his money. And they all go home with exactly the same amount of money as each other. And I want to know how much did they each spend. Looking at this problem to begin with, there's not a huge amount of information that's going to help me. I know there's 361 golden galleons altogether to begin with, but I'm not sure how that's split between the three of them. The information that I think is most useful is the fact that they all go home with the same amount of money as each other. So here's our 3 professors, and although I don't know how much money they end up going home with, I do know that they've got the same amount. And I can represent that using a bar, and each of those parts are exactly the same. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at Professor McGonagall. Now, it tells us that Professor McGonagall spends 1/4 of her money. If she spent 1/4 of her money, that means that what she takes home is 3/4. So we can split that into 3/4, and then we can say, well, we need another quarter, which is what she spent. Likewise with Professor Lupin, we know that he spends half of his money. So if he spent half of his money, he must have taken home half, which means that the money he spent is exactly the same as the amount that he took home. And then Professor Moody, we know that he spends 2/3 of his money, which means he took home 1/3 of his money. So if that's 1/3 of what he spent, must be 2 of those thirds. So there we've got a visual for each of the amounts of money the professors took home and spent. Now I can go back to the information that I was told at the start, and that's that they had 361 galleons altogether. So we can show that all of that added together comes to 361 galleons. The problem we've got now is that we can't share that 361 galleons between each of those parts yet because the parts are different sizes. But what we did at the start was we split Professor McGonagall's take-home into 3 parts. Now, if we did that for Professor McGonagall, we can do exactly the same for Professor Lupin and Professor Moody. And we also knew that the amount that Lupin took home was exactly the same amount as he spent, which means we can split that into 3 parts also. Likewise with Professor Moody, that third we've split into 3 parts, so we're going to do that with the other 2/3 that he spent. Now what we've got is 19 parts altogether that adds up to 361 galleons. That was a little bit mean of me because we're now having to share out 361 between 19 or divide 361 by 19, and I certainly can't do that in my head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that in parts. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think, well, I could put 10 galleons in each of those parts, which means I've already shared out 190 galleons. Now that leaves me with 171 galleons left over, and if I share that out, I might not know that. I might have shared out another 5 each or another 2 each. I can do it in as many parts as I want, but I know that 171 shared between the 19 parts is going to give me 9 in each of those, which means I've now shared out all 361 galleons. I've put 190 out first by putting 10 in each, and then I've shared out 171 by putting 9 in each. I can now see that each of those parts is worth 19. Now all that's left to do is count up how much each of them spent. So Professor McGonagall, she just spent 1 of those parts, so that's 19 galleons. Professor Lupin spent 3 of those parts, so that's 57 galleons. And Professor Moody spent 6 of those parts, so that's 114 galleons. And of course, we can put in the 57 galleons which they each took home. And if we want to double check that, we can just add that all up to make sure that that comes back to the 361 galleons. So we've got 57 plus 19 plus 57 plus 57 plus 57 plus 114, which does indeed add up to 361 galleons. That's just how I would solve it. I like to use bar models because that helps me visualise the relationship between each of the values that we've got in the problem. I appreciate there's different ways we could have done that. It would be interesting to see how you went about solving it. I hope that makes sense and you're ready to have a go at this week's challenge. Good luck.